Hello and welcome to another Ask Cheeky. I'm Isaiah Henkel with Cheeky Scientist. This week's question is a long one and it comes from Jeremy Rohn. Jeremy says, I have a very unique background as a PhD. You talk a lot about jobs that seem to only be for scientists. What about people with other degrees? My degree is in a social science background and the field is very specific. There's no job titles matching this field. What do you say? Jeremy, thanks for your question and for your details. We've heard countless versions of this question, and what it boils down to is this. As a PhD, we study in academia in a very specific niche field. Academia splits hairs. If you are a scientist, like you say, or like you referred to, that we talk to a lot of scientists, you're studying a very specific protein, and your background, therefore, might be that protein. I myself studied B cell development, T cell function. So I referred to myself as a B cell development immunologist or a T cell function immunologist. Of course, there were no job titles when I started looking for a job called B cell development immunologist. And so I thought, there's no jobs out there for me. I'm never going to find a job. There's nothing even close to that. And if a job required that background, that was still rare. Just to find, as I learned that the job titles were super generic, like scientist one, scientist two, I would start combing through those job titles, and then at best I could find one that said, maybe B cell or T cell, etc. But they're still very rare, and so you have to change the way you think about things. You're a social scientist. I guarantee you have a specific background that's not just social sciences, but it probably goes deeper into a niche such as, I don't know, you study the sociology of historical culture, or you're studying the specific studying specific data for a certain group or a certain type theory or a certain subdomain of your field. I guarantee you it's very, very specific. I have people come to me all the time saying, I'm a computational analytical chemist. There's no job titles out there for that, for my background. Our offices are near a large agricultural area with a lot of graduate schools that are in agriculture. And so they might study cows or wheat, something very specific. And I said, I can't find any jobs out there for my specific background. It's because, again, industry doesn't work that way. It'll be much more generic in industry. Again, it'll be scientist one, scientist two. For you, it might just be researcher or analyst. Okay, so why am I talking about this? Because I want you to change the way in which you look for jobs. I want you to change the way in which you see yourself, the job titles that you can get into, your skills, the skills that actually matter. Get away from looking at the world with just your limited technical expertise. That's right. The way you're looking at things is very limited. You're limiting yourself based on your niche background, whatever your PhD granting department was, or whatever your lab worked in, or whatever your advisor, your professor, whatever your thesis work was in. Far too limited. You need to realize that you have key transferable skills that can transfer across any industry and can get you a job at any company. That's right. We recently had a social scientist hired at Hilton as a user experience analyst, which I'm going to come back to. We had a humanities PhD in the association get hired at Home Depot as a user experience researcher. Okay? What does it end in? Analyst, researcher. If it ends in that, doesn't matter what your PhD is, and you can do that because you've learned how to do research, how to collect information and data. You've also learned how to analyze information and data. And those two skills are what make you incredibly valuable. If we had to narrow it down to two skills overall, it's those two skills. And it's the same two skills. We've been talking about this a lot. The McKinsey & Company just released a report on saying there's a 20% deficit in the job market for people who can do research and analyze information and data. And no matter what your PhD background is, you've had to do research to collect information to write a thesis. Whether it was information or data, it doesn't matter. Okay, so what are jobs that are very valuable to you? I've got a list of 10 here no matter what your PhD background is, especially for you, Jeremy. The first is the one I've already referred to, a user experience researcher or analyst. This is a very, very popular job, trending up right now. One of the most popular new job titles or buzzwords. The position's been there for a long time. It's really a consumer analyst or a consumer researcher. So you're just looking at the data or the information, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, based on consumer feedback, client feedback. Now, software is taking over the world, so people are referring to it as user now. Even Home Depot or Hilton, the companies that I just told you are hiring PhDs, even with your background, Jeremy, this position is open to anyone. It ends in research or ends in analyst. What do you think you do in this position? You collect information or help collect information or data, and then you analyze it and you draw actionable conclusions. Very popular position. Another popular one is business development manager. A lot of our PhDs are getting hired into this role, and for a variety of reasons, because for most of these positions, you will be building B2B relationships, business to business relationships versus business to consumer relationships, which are B2C. Now, in a business to business relationship, you might be thinking, why are PhDs hired into this? Because a lot of the businesses or the key opinion leaders at businesses that business A might want to attract are PhDs or MDs or advanced degree holders. So the best way to build relationships with those KOLs in another business is to hire people who also have a PhD who can speak to those other higher level professionals. Business development manager, any business development position. Sometimes it's business development associate, business development analyst. Doesn't matter, you can get into that role. Application specialist. Now, depending on the field, it could be application scientist, application engineer, application specialist. Either way, you're helping a company. You're working with the company's sales teams, marketing teams. You're working with their development teams. It's a very cross-functional role. And what you're doing is helping that company's clients apply that company's products, right? So you have company A that you would work for. They sold a product to company B. Maybe it's a microscope, right? Maybe it's a $100,000 piece of equipment. Maybe it's a huge software package, a big cloud package they have to help integrate. Whatever it is, they need you, a high-level technical person or an advanced degree holder, to go in there and to help that company, the key opinion leaders at that company, apply or integrate your company's products. Application specialist. This one's pretty simple. Researcher or analyst, okay? Your job could just be to work in R&D one way or another. Again, and it doesn't matter what your background is. If you're not a scientist or an engineer, if it's not data you're working with, then it might just be information. Either way, you're collecting information, collecting data. That's the research part. And then you're analyzing it, looking for trends, looking for significance. Very few people in the world overall have this skill. You do as a PhD, no matter what your background is. Data scientist. Now, I know you're thinking, you're like, there, you're going back to science again. No, it could be a data scientist, a data engineer, a data specialist. We see this called a data specialist or a data analyst quite frequently. Sometimes it's just a data researcher, which again just comes back to going through large information or data sets. That's it. Now, half of the jobs in this field require you to understand some programming language. And it doesn't matter if you have a background in life sciences, physical sciences, engineering, humanities, social sciences. I've seen PhDs with any one of those backgrounds, any background, able to learn Python, etc. And what that does is it just makes you more valuable in the job market. So you can go through large amounts of information or data for a company, and you can also do some programming or modeling. However, that's only half the jobs in this field. The other half, you don't have to know any programming language. You just have to know how to do what again? Comes back to those two transferable skills. Collect information or data, and then analyze it to draw conclusions. Are you seeing the trend? Next, medical writer. Sometimes medical writer, sometimes scientific writer, sometimes engineering writer, sometimes just writer or technical writer, okay? And believe it or not, whether you're social sciences, humanities, life sciences, engineering, you are a technical writer. You have written your thesis, you have written peer-reviewed journal articles, grants. No matter what your background is, you can get into this role, and it's growing quickly. Content is king. No matter what company you go to work for, they need to produce a lot of content and likely a lot of what they call is technical content, which just means content that uses a nomenclature in a field. You had to learn a new nomenclature when you went into grad school, postdoc, whatever you did afterwards, TAing, teaching. You're just going to learn another nomenclature and write about it. You're skilled in this. Patent examiner, and then patent agent. Really breaks apart the research and the writing phase of it. So the patent examiner might work for a government office in this case. You are researching patents. You could work for a law firm as well. You're researching patents and you're finding out information about whether a patent is viable, whether something similar has been patented before. And then there's a patent agent. This is another role. This is where you're writing a patent, you're submitting it. You usually need an extra certification for this. Patent examiner, examining patents, patent agent, you're writing the patents. Those are two roles. No matter your background as a PhD, you can get hired into, and they are growing. Why? All businesses want to patent things because it gives them an edge in the marketplace because people can't copy whatever they've patented. You've likely had some experience with this at your university. If you're still at a university, you can get experience with this, especially if your university has a tech transfer office. A couple more. Regulatory affairs. This is the last one, I think. I think this will make 10. Regulatory affairs. Last one we'll talk about. What does this mean? Regulations. As PhDs, you are very skilled in protocols, methodologies, lesson plans. Okay, you're able to plan. That's a highly valuable skill, and you're able to adjust that plan based on feedback and information and data. This is what regulatory affairs is all about. Every company has to abide by rules. As the company gets bigger, it becomes more important not to break a government rule, okay? Because some companies, depending on the country, can have more revenue than smaller countries have in GDP. Okay, and what does this mean? It means that they're playing on a much larger stage, a macroeconomic level. The way the government will regulate it, especially if it's big pharma or tech or biotech, engineering, doesn't matter what it is. I mentioned Hilton and Home Depot earlier. And again, it doesn't matter what your background is. If you can read through documents, create documentation, which any PhD can do, you can get into this role. So hopefully, Jeremy, this helps you understand the different positions that are available to you, some of the top trending ones right now. Don't overthink it. Remember, industry thinks in more general terms. They're looking for those key transferable skills, the two in particular of collecting information and data and then analyzing it to draw actionable conclusions. As always, remember your value as a PhD and start thinking and acting like a successful industry professional.